Spring Awakening is an influential and revolutionary show. The topics addressed are still topics that are discussed, but not necessarily accepted, and I think they are as relevant as they were when the show first opened. Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Timmons, and the purpose of this speech is to talk about the themes of the Tony Award-winning musical Spring Awakening, and to pose some discussion questions for further exploration. To prepare for this speech, I read the musical, listened to the songs, watched clips of different performances, and read numerous interviews and articles. The three themes that I will be discussing are the exploration of sex and sexuality, shame, and parenting. So with that, let's begin with talking about sex. The first main theme I would like us all to have a discussion about is the exploration of sex and sexuality. Ricky Ziegelman of Onstage Blog says, quote, "These kids are so desperate to know more about themselves in terms of their sexuality. They know what they read in books, and they know what they feel, and they know how they want to feel. But how to perform all of these actions and how to handle this sensation is what they struggle with." End quote. I really like this quote because it talks about the internal dialogue that goes through these characters' minds as they start to become sexually active. Is it a bad thing? Is it exactly what the book says it is? Am I wrong to feel or think this way? These are very real and poignant questions people ask themselves when it comes to sexual exploration that Spring Awakening brings out. Spring Awakening also sheds a light on the different ways characters explore sex through masturbating, spanking or whipping, and reading, among other things. Tom Andrew of Rage Monthly points out the importance of one key component when exploring sex and sexuality, saying, quote, "He is struggling with his sexuality and is not really sure if he prefers men or women. He is taken under the wing of fellow student Melchior, who he looks to Melchior for support because they are friends who both suffer from similar circumstances." The themes discussed in Spring Awakening are nothing new. They are things that every human being knows and goes through. But what Spring Awakening adds is that when trying to figure out sex and sexuality, it's important to know that you aren't alone. And it's important, and the importance of being able to confide in just one person helps to help you figure things out. Sex and sexuality is a shared experience that shouldn't be a taboo subject, especially when it comes to friends. When talking about the exploration of sex and sexuality, many of the kids in this musical go through many mood swings. On page 24, during the song The Bitch of Living, Moritz and the boys sing, quote, "It's the bitch of living with nothing but your hand, just the bitch of living as someone you can't stand." This song is packed with a bunch of wonderful lyrics, but I chose this specific one because it talks about the exploration of sex and sexuality can be so hard and can be a bitch to deal with. It also talks about how they start to hate themselves for doing it because they have been told this is wrong, which is a theme I'll go deeper into. The question I'd like to pose for future conversations are, is there still a taboo on discussing sexual exploration? Why is that? And if there isn't a taboo, are there things that should stay private? And now I'd like to transition from the theme of sex to another S theme, which would be shame. Much of shame that comes from this musical is centered around the theme of sex and sexuality, and mainly the need to suppress these thoughts and actions because it's deemed wrong in society. In an article on a review of Notre Dame's production of Spring Awakening, Becky Malwitz quotes writer Duncan Sheik, who says, quote, "It's not teenage sexuality and raciness, sexual abuse and abortion. It's about the fact that these things have been happening since the beginning of humankind. They will unfortunately probably happen for a long time after, and the really important thing is for parents to be able to communicate with their kids in a real, authentic, and open way about this stuff so it's not as traumatic and damaging and terrible and horrible." I chose this quote for the theme of shame because it drives home the point of shame. Shame comes from feeling humiliated because of wrong or foolish behavior. Exploring these themes in the musical and in life as not wrong or foolish because it's a natural occurrence that every human being goes through. And what Spring Awakening tries to do is bring these topics up so there can be conversations that celebrates and educates people instead of shaming and diminishing them. Lack of communication also comes from a lack of education that brings about shame. In a review for a recent production of Spring Awakening, John Townsend says, quote, Maritza's performance truly penetrates how horrendous the psyche body blows of shame can actually be on a young person with no place to turn for rational information. This does not only apply to physical and emotional desire, but how institutionalized education can butcher the souls of young people. When you can't turn to anyone to answer your questions, have an open dialogue with, or be educated about human nature, that's where shame and judgment starts to flood in. The play itself brings up the topic of shame directly. On page 32, Melchior writes in his journal, quote, 16 October, the question is shame. What is its origin? And why are we hounded by its miserable shadow? Does a mare feel shame as she couples with a stallion? Are they deaf to everything their loins are telling them until we grant them a marriage certificate? I think not. To my mind, shame is nothing but a product of education. The self-awareness of shame that the education he and his fellow classmates receive is done in secret. Never could he bring to light that he writes, or it would be met with punishment, as it is soon discovered throughout the course of this musical. Which is why I chose this quote as evidence when dealing with the theme of shame, because of the irrational pressure there is to never talk about these subjects due to the lurking feeling of shame. My second discussion question I would like to pose is there still shame today when it comes to talking about subjects such as sex, sexuality, abortion, and abuse? And if so, where does it come from? With that question in mind, I would like to introduce my third and final theme, parenting. Many parents wrestle with the topics they are going to educate their children on and when to tell kids the full truth, and it's a theme Spring Awakening jumps on right away. Trevor Buffon of Theater Times says when reviewing a recent production of Spring Awakening at Tuts, quotes, Spring Awakening follows a group of young teens as they struggle with coming of age in a community that keeps them in the dark, even though they desperately want to be educated and learn about the mysterious feelings materializing through their bodies. This theme is brought on very early in the play when Wendella continually asks about how her baby niece was born and her mother's decision to keep her in the dark about the complete truth. This theme is brought on in the second page of the script and continues throughout the play that ends up having irreversible consequence. The lack of acknowledgement and awareness and communication with parents and children is present throughout the play as well. In a recent video interview with writer Steven Sater, when responding to how the shootings at Columbine helped push the project further and the importance of the Parkland production had a message of adolescence, he said, quote, what I felt in the wake of those terrible shootings and how little we had learned and how much we were still failing to listen to what was going on in the hearts of our children, that those parents had no idea what those boys were doing in their basements. His teachers really failed to pay any serious attention. Spring Awakening shines a spotlight on the importance of listening to children, allowing them to discover themselves and responding to them in appropriate ways. Even in co-parenting, there are debates when it comes to what to tell your children and how to deal with misbehavior. In the play, Frau and Herr Gaber are discussing what to do with Melchior when they learn of his essay and expulsion. Frau Gaber defends her son until it's learned that he doesn't regret anything he did to Wendella. On page 83, Herr Gaber says, defiling himself and all but destroying that girl. So you tell me, Fanny, what shall we do? In which Frau Gaber responds with, what you will, a reformatory. This quote has a lot of undertones and how parents are influenced by society and the limits of a community puts on parents to raise their kids right. This is a huge factor that related to the setting of the musical itself, but also mirrors what still happens today in society. So, the final question I would like to pose is there a certain age limit to talk to children about serious topics such as sex, death, and sexual identity? With all that in mind, what we would now go into a discussion with, I would just like to restate the questions I mentioned earlier for everyone to reflect on, and hopefully have an open dialogue with friends via FaceTime or whomever you are social distancing with. So, the questions are, is there still a taboo on sexual exploration? Why is that? And if there isn't a taboo, are there some things that should stay private? 2, is there still shame today when it comes to talking about subjects such as sex, sexuality, abortion, and abuse? And if so, where does it come from? And 3rd, is there a certain age limit to talk to children about serious topics such as sex, death, and sexual identity? I know this is not the planned form of discussion questions, but I thank you all for giving them some thought. So to conclude this speech, the purpose of this speech was to learn about a few of the themes of Spring Awakening and pose some questions in regards to those themes. The themes I covered included the exploration of sex and sexuality, shame, and parenting. Something I would like for all of you to take away from this speech is that these are not the only themes of Spring Awakening. There are so many more, such as rebellion, innocence, and suicide that I didn't have the ability to cover. In fact, the hardest part about writing this speech was trying to stick to just these 3 themes. I'd like to end with a quote from the play that still encourages everyone to never stop exploring and never stop sharing. Still, you know there is so much more to find. Another dream, another love you'll hold. Still, you know to trust your own mind. On your way, you are not alone. Thank you.